The Freydis storyline in Vikings Valhalla made me want to throw my TV out the goddamn window. And let me get this out of the way immediately. This is not because she's a woman. That is a dumb defense a lot of people always run to when a badly written female character is getting criticized. Vikings already had Lagertha, and I liked her. Lagertha was great. She felt like she belonged in that world. She was strong and dangerous and exceptionally believable. And Freydis, it's different. She feels extremely forced, which is a huge problem for me. Her storyline doesn't feel natural. It feels pushed. It feels like the writers decided from the beginning that she had to be important and powerful and symbolic, spiritual, all of that. They skipped half of the work that needed to be done to get her to that place. So, for me, that's not how you build a great character. That is how you create a character that I start to resent. Because the show keeps treating Freydis like this massive deal, but I never bought it. I never believed it. I never felt the weight. I never felt, like I was watching someone earn that position in this brutal Viking world. It felt like I was watching the writers clear a path for her and asking me to just clap and applaud it, when she reached the end of all of it. And it's especially bad in a show like Vikings, because this is a world that is supposed to be extremely hard. It's supposed to be dirty and violent and gritty and dangerous. People don't just become legends because the scripts say so. No, they should bleed for it. They should fail and overcome. They should lose and have to make difficult, ugly choices. That's how a character gets shaped by the world around them. And with Freydis, too much of what she does, too much of what she accomplishes, it's just too easy. She goes from survivor to warrior to religious symbol extremely fast, like way too fast. She survives too much. She wins everything too easily. She becomes important too quickly. And for me, after a while, I don't think that's really inspired. It feels fake. And that's where a lot of the plot armor that she has, comes in. When a character keeps walking through situations that should, break them, crush them, that's when the tension dies for me. I stop caring, I stop worrying, I stop believing the stakes. I stop feeling like this is a brutal Viking world, and I start feeling like I'm watching a character being protected by the writers. And for me, that's a no go. Because Vikings works when the danger feels real. Even the strongest characters, they should feel like the world could crush them. With the original Vikings, Ragnar could lose, Lagertha could suffer, and Rollo could destroy himself. Floki could break. The original show was messy, but at its best, it understood that, all that power has a cost to it. You have to work for it, for that power. You have to sacrifice for the power. But Freydis often feels like power without putting in the cost, putting in the work. And then you have the whole Keeper of the Faith storyline, which honestly felt really tiresome. The original Vikings already did the pagan versus Christian conflict. It did it for years. It explored faith and doubt and conversion and betrayal and the gods and all of that. So when Valhalla pushes Freydis into another, big pagan destiny storyline or whatever, it doesn't feel fresh. It feels recycled. We have already seen this. I already saw it. And I've seen it done better in the original one. And the problem is not that religion is part of the show. It should be. This is a Viking series. Faith should matter. The gods should matter, obviously, you know. But it's too on the nose. It's too heavy handed. It's too much telling instead of showing me. The show keeps telling me, look at this. This is important, instead of making me actually feel that it is important. I think that's one of the most important things in books, in stories, in movies. Show, don't tell. And this show is a lot about telling instead of showing. And that's my issue with a lot of Valhalla. It tells me things matter more than it makes me feel them. Freydis' following is another problem for me. The speed at which she becomes this major figure, this symbol, this person that people gather around and follow. That never felt believable at all. It felt rushed. It felt like the show wanted the result without, you know, putting in the work. Just give it to her. Just grant her, the legendary status. And it just pulls me out of the story. Because when someone becomes legendary too fast, then, well, that person isn't really a legendary, isn't really a legend. It's extremely cheap. And the worst part is that her storyline keeps stealing a lot of the oxygen from the parts of the show that I actually wanted more of. Harold. I liked Harold. He had, well, some charisma. He had some gravitas, a really strong pull to actually, watch it. Leif, maybe a little bit. Maybe he was somewhat of an interesting character in the beginning, but for me, not too much. I liked Harold. I wanted to see more of Harold. The wider world, it definitely had potential. Constantinople, the exploration, the politics, the power, all the traveling. All that stuff could have made Valhalla feel bigger and more alive. But you keep getting dragged back into Freydis' material, the storyline of Freydis. And every time that happens, my interest just drops. It just pissed me off. It felt like a worse show interrupting a better show. And honestly, maybe that story should have been its own thing. I get that. Make it a separate Shield Maiden series, for instance. Make it a female Viking quest show. Fine, do something like that. But build it properly. Give it its own identity. But not inside Vikings Valhalla. That's what annoyed me, like, to no end. Because Valhalla already had this huge problem. It didn't feel like Vikings. It had the title, it had the blood and the costumes and all of it. But, it it never had that original feeling to it. Valhalla often feels, well, cheaper and flatter, I think. And the acting doesn't help either. Too many of the scenes feel stiff. Too many moments feel like people are saying a lot of important shit without, actually doing important stuff, right? The original wasn't perfect, I get that, but when it worked, it worked well. It had, energy, atmosphere, gravitas. It really pulled you in. Valhalla never did that. Valhalla too often feels like just Netflix trying to recreate Vikings without understanding what Vikings really was. And Freydis is the clearest example of that. She feels forced, too pushy, recycled, and rushed. And that is why Legata worked and Freydis did not. Freydis too often feels like, homework, like an assignment, something you have to keep pushing yourself through before you get to the fun stuff of the series. And it sucks because I think it could have worked. A strong female Viking character, that isn't the issue. A Shield Maiden storyline, that's not the issue for me. But you have to earn it. And that's where the writing fails this show. A strong character doesn't become strong because the show keeps telling me that she's strong or he is strong. A legendary character doesn't become legendary because, people in the story start acting like she's legendary. You have to make me feel it. You have to make me believe it. And you have to make the journey convincing. And Freydis never, ever did that for me. She made the show feel less grounded, less believable, less connected to the parts that actually worked. Every time her storyline took over, Valhalla felt further away from the show that I wanted it to be, the show that I wanted to see, the parts that I actually thought were interesting. And that's why for me, Freydis was the worst part of Vikings Valhalla, by far. And it wasn't because she was this, quote-unquote strong character, but because she was badly written. She's the clearest sign that Valhalla did not understand what made Vikings work in the first place.